Welcome back, everyone. In the last lesson, we finished up integrating our apps with Firebase. And now the next step that we are going to do is talk about authentication. All right, so go ahead and open up a new tab and just do a search for Firebase authentication. All right, and check out this first one here. All right, so what do we mean when we talk about authentication? If you think about most of the apps that you use, you probably have some sort of authentication. When you first opened it, you were required to either enter an email and password or log in with Google or Facebook or Twitter or some sort of authentication method. All right, so here it's saying that most apps need to know the identity of a user. Knowing a user's identity allows an app to securely save user data in the cloud and provide the same personalized experience across all of the user's devices. All right, so this is necessary so that if you go from your iPhone to your iPad, for instance, using the same app, you have the same data across both of those devices. And Firebase Authentication provides backend services, easy-to-use SDKs, and ready-made UI libraries to authenticate users to your app. It supports authentication using passwords, phone number, popular federated identity providers like Google, Facebook, Twitter, and more. All right, and the other thing that I want to look at here is it says to sign a user into your app. This is how it works. You first get authentication credentials from the user. These credentials can be user's email address and password or an OAuth token from a federated identity provider. Then you pass these credentials to the Firebase Authentication SDK. The Firebase backend services will then verify those credentials and return a response to the client. After a successful sign-in, you can access the user's basic profile information and you can control the user's access to data stored in other Firebase products. All right, so Firebase makes it super easy to handle all of this authentication stuff. It's really great. It's my go-to for any sort of user authentication. All right, so back in our console, and we want to be on Artable. We are going to go to authentication here. And then you'll see here that it says that we need to set up sign-in method. All right, so come here to sign-in method. And we are going to start out with email and password, okay? So you can see here all of the many sign-in providers that Firebase supports. Email, password, phone, Google, Play, Game Center, Facebook, Twitter, GitHub, Anonymous. So you can, have a whole lot of sign-in providers. Most apps usually just have email and password, Facebook and Google. I think those are probably the three most popular sign-in providers. But like I said, we're going to be working with email and password to start out with. Later on, we're also going to turn on anonymous login. Okay, so all you got to do is click here on this edit button and say enable. And this is actually new, email link passwordless sign-in. So that's interesting. Right now, we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to do the traditional email and password. And I'm going to say save. And if we go back to users, you can now see that this is where our users are going to show up. You can search by email address, phone number, or user UID. You can even add a user manually. You can put in an email and a password. All right, so now we have the ability to register and log in with users as far as the backend goes. Now let's learn how we handle that in the client app, okay? So let's go back into Xcode. All right, so right now when we run this, we get a blank screen. And that is because by default, if you have a main.storyboard, that is the one that is going to get loaded, okay? So we need to we need to learn how we can instead launch this storyboard, okay? So what we're gonna do is, first thing we can do is set this as the initial view controller, okay? Now this doesn't mean that now when we run it, it's going to load this storyboard. It just means that if you loaded this storyboard, this would be the initial view controller. So what we have to do, and this is just to kind of get it to the point that we are seeing these views instead. Here in our view controller.swift, this is going to be our main storyboards. One view controller. This is the blank screen that we see when we run the app. We are going to load here in the view did load the storyboard, the login storyboard's initial view controller. And the way to do that is simply by initializing the storyboard and controller and then presenting it, okay? So we're gonna say let storyboard equal UI storyboard with a name, and our name is login storyboard, and the bundle you can say nil. All right, so we got a reference to our storyboard. Now we need the controller. So I'm gonna say let controller equal storyboard dot instantiate view controller with identifier. So now we need a storyboard identifier in our login storyboard. Okay, so I'm gonna come over here, and the one that we want is not this one as you might think, but it's actually this one. You want the root navigation controller. And so we come over here to its identity inspector and provide here a storyboard ID. And I'm going to call this login VC. I'm gonna copy that and come back to our view controller and paste that right here. And finally, we simply present the view controller. This is a method of the UI view controller. We are presenting a view controller, and we have the options to animate and a completion. We want to present this controller that we just initialized, true and nil. For the completion, we don't need to do anything once it has done that. So now when we run this, it's going to hit here first in the main view controller of the main storyboard, and then it should immediately, let's see here, something's not quite right. Oh, I made the mistake. Artable, got to make sure you're on the correct scheme. All right, so switch into our main Artable scheme and running it. Okay, and we are still getting a blank screen, but we got an error here. It says that we are attempting to present a view controller whose view is not in the window hierarchy, okay? So what's happening here is that we are trying to present from the view that hasn't quite been initialized yet here in view did load. So if we do view did appear, then, and we just cut this and put it right here, by the time view did appear rolls around, then we are able to present other views from this view controller. All right, there we go. All right, so there is our lovely UI. Got our email and passwords, and so we want to go to create new user, and yeah, that's looking good. I need to set this activity indicator and probably hide these check marks for now, but you know what, I think it's looking really nice. All right, so here is what we are going to be working on in this lesson. We are going to get the username, email, or just the email and the password, and we are going to register a user right here from our app, okay? So the first thing that we're gonna need to do is hook up our IB outlets, right? And to do that, we're gonna need some view controllers, because right now these views in our storyboard don't actually have view controller files. So let's go ahead and do some organizing in our project. I'm gonna right click and say new group, and I'm gonna call this controller. I'm gonna right click and say new group. This is going to be view. I'm gonna say new group, and this is model. And then I'm also going to add one for storyboards. Oop, did not spell that right. Storyboards. And I'm going to pull that down here to below the controller. I'm going to grab these 3 and put them inside of storyboards. Then I'm going to grab the view controller and the app delegate and put it inside of controller. And I'm going to right click on controller and say new file. And we're going to create 2 new view controller.swift files, one for login VC, and say next and create. And I'm going to move it up to the top. And then I'm going to right click and say new file again. And this is going to be for the register VC, and say next and create. I'm going to pull that right below login. All right, so let's go ahead and hook up the IB outlets for our register VC file here. I'm going to hold Option and click on the login storyboard. And before we are able to hook up any IB outlets, I'm going to close the document outline here. We need to set this view controllers class to the register VC file that we just created. Once that's done, we are able to create our outlets. All right, so I'm going to go right here and say outlets, and we are going to go ahead and just control and drag over. This is going to be our user name text. Oh, got a typo there, so I'm going to double click, right click, refactor, rename, and fix that typo right there. That's good. All right, and then I'm gonna control and drag for the email text. And then for the password, I'm going to, I think I'm grabbing the, there we go. For the password, control drag, password, text. And for the confirm password, do confirm pass text. And for the register button, we'll create an action. I don't think we're going to need an IB outlet for it. So I'm going to say register clicked and say connect. And then for the activity indicator, we want to make sure that we have hides when stopped. And then we'll create an outlet for it as well. We'll call it activity indicator and say connect. And then we'll go ahead and hide these 2 check marks for now. I'm just going to check hidden over here in its property inspector. And that should be good for us for now. That should be everything that we need to get started. So I'm going to go ahead and close our assistant editor. And then we're going to come back to the documentation here, Firebase authentication. And I want you to come here to the iOS Get Started. All right. Now, this is my challenge for you guys. It is extremely important if you want to become a successful developer that you learn how to read documentation. Okay. There's not always going to be someone there that can teach you and show you everything that you need to know. You have to learn how to dig through the documents and figure things out for yourself. All right. So what I want you to do is, starting here in the Get Started, I want you to look through right here and figure out how to sign up a new user, okay, with the email and password. All right. I want you to really actually try this. Okay. So pause the video and give it a shot. All right. All right, so I really hope that you gave that a try, that you tried to register a new user in your Firebase backend. If you had any problems, that's okay. All right, it's okay. Don't worry, we're gonna go through it together right now. Okay, so if I were you and I was looking through this documentation, this is what I would see, that we first need to import Firebase. So I go, okay, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to import Firebase. What's next? Come back here, Firebase app.configure. Oh, hey, we already did that as part of the Firebase setup. And then we have some things here. We can listen for authentication state. Ooh, look at this. Sign up new users. That's what Johnny told me to do. All right, so what do we have here? We have Swift and Objective-C. We're obviously using Swift. So it looks like all I need to do is copy this and put it right here in register clicked. Okay, so that looks all right. Uh-oh, we have some errors here. Looks like I need to pass into the create user method an email and a password, okay? So how do I get the email and password? Well, we have our IB outlets for the email and password text fields. So you should know how to do that by now. We're gonna say guard let email equal to email text.text, and we're going to make sure that it's not empty. So I'm going to say not email.is empty. And then while we're at it, we're going to go ahead and get the password text and the confirm pass text as well as the username. Let's do the username first. So I'm going to say let username equal username text.text, where the username is not empty. So not username is empty. Then let's get the password and the confirm password text fields. I'm going to say let password. Actually, all we need to do is just get the password from one of them, because later on we're going to ensure that they are the same. Okay, so let password equal password text.text, where password dot is empty, where it's not empty, so we need the exclamation here, and that's all we need here. So I'm going to say else return. Okay, so now that we have the email and password, our function is complete. All right, so let me kind of go through and show you what is actually happening here. So auth.auth, this here, gets the auth object for the default Firebase app, okay? So this is a singleton, and we're gonna be using this a lot throughout the app. Basically, you can think of it as this is just the class that we need to access to get any logged in user or any methods that have to do with managing the user. Okay, so in this case, we are using the .createUser method. And so you see here it says creates and on success signs in a user with the given email address and password. Okay, so we are going to be creating a new user with email and password. So we should probably check to make sure that there weren't any errors. So I'm going to say if let error is equal to error. Then we'll go ahead and debug, print it, and return out of this function. In a couple of lessons, we are going to go into more in-depth error handling to make sure this is a robust app that can handle all of the various errors that we may encounter. And if you needed access to the user at this point, you could say guard let user is equal to auth result dot, and then you have more information. You have the additional user info. You have the user right here. We don't need any of that right now. So all I'm going to do is simply say print success fully registered new user. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and that should work for us. Let's go ahead and test it out. I'm going to run it, and we're going to go to create new user. I'm going to put in an email here, johnny@test.com 123 123 123. I'm going to click register, and when we go back to our authentication tab here for users, and I refresh this, if all went according to plan, we should see no users. All right, let's see what went wrong, if we got any error here. Passwords, iCloud keychain is a bold. Oh, you know why? Because I didn't put in a username. We exited, we didn't even get to the create user function. All right, back to simulator. I need to put in a username, Johnny. Okay, there we go. All right, now register. There we go. Successfully registered new user is printed out. And if we refresh here, we see Johnny at test. And you can see here providers. We have a little icon for email. This is indicating that this user signed in or registered using the email and password provider. We have a date created, when they last signed in, and then a user UID. All right, so this is really important. This is the identifier for this user that we are going to use to store data, access different things. This is the identifier for this user across any other platforms. All right, so that's it. That is how simple Firebase makes it to register and authenticate users. So again, I hope you were able to spend a little bit of time in the documentation. I would highly, highly recommend going through these first few sections here, especially regarding the ones that we're going to be using, which is password authentication and anonymous authentication here. All right, so in the next lesson, we are going to be taking a look at signing in users. So I hope you're excited for that, and I'll see you in the next one.